everyone, my name is Dessa, aka Writing from the Shadows.
And I am Rika, aka Vestigial Claws.
And welcome to Work in Progress. If you're used to watching the video version of this podcast, we are just going to be doing audio only this week just so that we can get a podcast out. As we mentioned when we first started doing this project, the beginning of the year was going to be tricky for us because Rika started school again, so that's why we're a little behind on episodes, but we're not pausing the podcast at all. We're still going. And so for this week's episode, we kind of did a double header since we missed a couple of weeks and reread chapters 6 and 7.
Yes.
Of Where Your Loyalties Lie. So with that said, let's get into it.
Okay, so I think chapters 6 and 7, we are really starting to get into a lot of plot meat. I feel like I use that phrase a lot. I enjoy it. I like describing things as meat. We're going to deal with meat descriptors. But this is really like we have the exposition, we have a world building, we have our basic character introductions, and we're starting to get into it. We're starting to see where the intrigue is coming in, and towards the end of a chapter, we're starting to get a little bit of spice. And yes, we will be talking about spice. But first to get into it, I'd kind of like to give like almost a little bit of a sort of a back and forth overview of what went on within these two chapters before we really get into questions, because it was a lot.
Yeah.
Like this is really, really the first major time that we're seeing a lot of plot movement and a lot beyond establishing.
Yeah.
So, I think that as we're starting, we are very much getting a sense of what you said in some of the earlier episodes from the story being told through Chuya's point of view. We get to work through a lot of Chuya's thought process in solving the puzzles that Dazai gives him.
Yeah.
In solving those, can you talk a little bit about how you laid that out, just writing style-wise? Because the way specifically that you show the passage of time in it is very clever.
Oh, thank you. Well, the main thing when it comes to this chapter is I actually didn't know how to start it. And so I knew how this chapter 6, was going to end. And I rewrote the ending of the chapter, I want to say like 4 or 5 times, but I finished it and then I didn't know how to start it, and that's why he trips over the papers, because I was like, you know what, if I don't, I don't remember where I saw this, but there was writing advice somewhere floating out in the ether that if you don't know how to work on a story, if you don't know how to start it, do something unexpected that kind of forces the plot forward. And I was like, you know what? None of us are expecting Chuya to trip over some papers. And I just thought it was funny. And that's really what I used to move time forward in chapter 6, was just like the reports. So he gets the reports, he goes through them, he gets the report, he goes through them. And so it's a good way to kind of go, Chuya's been thinking about this for 1 day, he's been thinking about this for 2 days, he's been thinking about it for 3 days, without it just being like, for 3 days, Chuya couldn't make up his mind. But that's kind of boring. I didn't want it to just be him like ruminating on the future, and so that's where the reports came in. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
It actually kind of did.
Okay.
I think that like to kind of sum up there, you use a lot of the show rather than tell philosophy in your writing, and especially with the passage of time, it's just a good way for like the audience to mark it without it taking the audience out of the story, like a lot of transitions can sometimes do. So
yeah,
I just enjoyed that the flow of it almost makes like the length of the chapters not seem daunting. Sometimes there will be things that you read that are very long and that just don't flow as well, so you feel the length. This story is not one of them.
Oh, thank you.
Which is kind of lovely for me. So, coupled with that, with the reports, so like, just from a stylistic aspect, they're a way to move time, but from a character development aspect, we're kind of seeing Dazai and Chuya communicate a lot without speaking.
Yes.
And the reports, the way that they are sort of, Dazai's testing what Chuya's knowledge is, but Chuya's also, like, he's delivering, and he is analyzing what Dazai wants from a situation, and what he's willing to deliver to manipulate things to his own ends. So we're seeing a lot of interaction and clash and engagement between the two of them, without them ever actually saying anything.
Yeah.
Is this something that, like, was that part planned out, or was that just the way that things kind of fell together?
No, that is very much going to be a factor of Dazai and Chuya's relationship and interactions from basically here on out going forward. Something that a lot of people have heard me talk about the story are familiar with is that when it comes to Dazai and Chuya in the story, because they're coming from such opposite worlds, because they don't have any reason to trust each other, they're both aware that spoken, like, the word means nothing. They can lie to each other back and forth. They don't know each other necessarily well enough to be able to read a verbal lie as well as, like, they would in canon, because they've known each other forever. And so there really is this kind of overarching idea that, like, can I trust what you're saying? But you have the age-old adage, actions speak louder than words. So that's a lot of the ways they're going to be feeling each other out, is through the nonverbal stuff.
And that absolutely shows also in their judge of each other's competence. Like, not only are we talking about can they trust each other, and this is something I'm going to get into a little bit later, the question of can we trust anyone around them, but it's like, it's not just trust, it's also competence and skill, because we've kind of established that Chuya has been running a desk and being a strategic advisor for so long that, like, the stories about his abilities, like, his reputation is obviously there, but his reputation around what his strategic capabilities are, his tactical ones, like, that's where Dazai's area of interest is, and that's where the tests are coming. And that to me is very interesting, because that's almost like, it could almost be argued that that's what we've seen the most of from Chuya. So to me that there's almost an implication there of, like, Dazai wanting to separate out how much Chuya is capable of just sheerly on his own, like, without resources.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of that, and then also the little bit of how I'm always on the Chuya's intelligent train. I really did want to hammer that home when it comes to the story in general. So the fact that we had him going through the resources, and the fact that he had, like, no instructions, he just got these reports and he was able to go, okay, these are shipping numbers, and okay, these are bribes, and okay, this is X, Y, and Z. The fact that he can analyze that without any help was really important for me to get it across to the reader. Like, Chuya is very smart. But also, like you said, what can Chuya do on his own? Because even though Chuya in the Nakahara Kai is a Komen, and he is an advisor, he's not the head advisor. That's Louisa. And he's one of 4 other advisors. And so he usually has a team. So there's a question for Dazai as well as for the reader, like, how much of Chuya's position as a Komen is because he's a Nakahara and they needed to put him somewhere, and how much of it is because he's just really competent.
And it's an interesting way to kind of see Dazai feeling those tests out, especially because we see the information that he's giving Chuya is information that is relevant to the current investigation. So it was very interesting to be able to see Chuya's extrapolations, not just purely on the data itself and what it means, but on Dazai's intents with it, and on what Dazai giving the information to Chuya and looping him in meant. So it was just very interesting to see, especially with Chapter 6, I believe, that it was, like, just a very thorough deep dive into the way that Chuya's mind works.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that there were surprises for the reader in there. I think that, like, I know that you are very much the captain of the Chuya is very intelligent train.
Yeah.
And it was something that it absolutely came through in this. So where we are right now is we have Chuya and Dazai playing the game. We have mutual respect.
Yeah.
And we have a little bit of an unspoken kissy question. And we're going to talk about smut now. So, you don't like writing smut.
I do not.
You write very good smut.
Thank you.
I feel like this is something that I've kind of come across with a lot of fic writers, is either people love smut 24/7, that is their main musing, yes, or they hate it.
Yeah.
But you can't always tell which are which, because you get people like you who, despite not liking smut, you write very thorough, very detailed, and very plot-centric smut.
Thank you.
Is it, welcome. So, I don't know why that took me a second. I was like, that was a response. Anyways, as someone who does not like writing smut, how do you balance the expectations of the fact that fanfic as a genre tends to hold a little bit of reader expectation of that smutty content with the fact that you as a writer just kind of don't enjoy it? Like, how do you motivate? How do you decide, like, what the ratio of smut to, like, plot is going to be? And this third one you can actually probably answer separately, but I'm going to give it to you now. Anyways, exactly how much plot relevance drives your smut?
Well, really at the end of the day, this is my only chapter fic that has an explicit rating. All of my other chapter stories are usually mature for reasons of graphic depictions of violence. In the past, I either just skipped over it entirely, did some like poetic, vague, there is something happening here, but I'm not going to describe it, just because I don't enjoy writing smut. And when it comes to chapter stories, I found that kind of, when I hit the smut wall, I'm like, well, now I'm not going to update for 3 years because I don't feel like writing the smut. Whereas when it comes to like an individual story, a one shot or something like that, where it's very much like the integral part of the story, I get through those much easier and I can write them quicker. It still takes me 5 times longer to write a smut story than it takes me to write a story without smut. But when it comes to this story in particular, there's 2 reasons I put the smut in. One is because I just had this reputation of everyone was like, writing from the shadows, all she does is blue ball people. It's like, there's never anything in it. It's like that she writes these one shots. We know she can do this. Why won't she put it in the chapter fic? So there was like that speculation going on. I was like, you know what? Here you go. Here. And then the other part, which you kind of was your third question in terms of how much is it integral to the plot, also ties into my earlier answer of the story is really actions being louder than words. The smut is very, very important in this story. Even though I kind of put it in there as like, I can't do this. Even when I do that, I never put something in unless there's a reason for it to be there. And so since obviously they can't trust anything that they can say, one of the most intimate experiences you can have with someone is having sex. And so there's just a lot fewer walls that you can have up. There's an expectation of like, you have to be honest to some degree because, you know, it's just hard to maintain a lie while all of that's going on. And so all of the smut is important to the story, and it's put in the story at very deliberate points.
So it's really interesting that you actually would mention that the smut was kind of a way of physical honesty between the two of them to an extent, because that's actually kind of Chia's whole motivation for the smut. It wasn't based on just, okay, I'm in this situation, he's hot, I actually kind of want to have sex with him. It was a calculated move. It was Chia's chosen route to get close to Dazai. And in the story we see Chia currently is kind of balancing his hope that he can stay objective with the fact that he is now sexually entangled with his husband.
Yeah.
At this point in the story, how's Chia's optimism on that? Because I can tell you as an observer how my optimism is and exactly the face that I'm making at Chia through it.
I mean, at the end of the day, Chia's focus is on helping the Nakahara, and, you know, since he's been sold off as this housewife, he would hate me for saying that. He's not a housewife, but as he
got
was...
a good jab in about it.
He did.
I did too.
But, you know, he's really at this point where he's like, I'm going to use every tool I have to be useful. Part of it so it's that he doesn't feel like he's a waste of space, but part of it it's because he knows he's in this unique position. And I also think Chia is aware that he's an emotional individual. He knows that. He's grown up and he's experienced that, and he knows his life experience. Honestly, Chia's thought process was really not on how his emotions would come into play here. Especially not in a long-term sense. So that's not something he's really concerned about, just because he doesn't like Dessa.
I don't blame him.
So he's like, okay, he's attractive. I'm sure he's decent in bed. I already have to live with him anyways. Let's just go for it.
That's actually one of my favorite enemies to lovers tropes. You know this about me. Enemies to lovers is my number one favorite ship trope.
Yeah.
And usually there's like the two ways that it plays out, wherever we kind of blue ball, slow burn with sex until after there's emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
Or with sex being the gateway to emotional intimacy. We can kind of tell which way the story is looking to go. We think. But also, it's you, and first of all, your poker face is fantastic, and second of all, you like to be twisty, so all of my assumptions come with, like, a percentage of doubt. But from that one, words escaped my head.
Okay.
Words really escaped my head here. We were talking about sex.
We were talking about sex. And we were talking about it being used as a gateway to emotional intimacy.
Okay. So, you already said that the smut of his story is going to be important, kind of a litmus test of their physical honesty. So, are we going to be expecting, I guess, some different sexual expression depending on how comfortable the two get with each other? And is it going to end up being... God, I'm sorry, I lost this one. I just completely lost this one. Can we just cut this little section?
I'll think about it.
Oh my god. I'm real out of practice here. Oh my god. Okay. So, we're gonna... I'm trying to figure out if I've beaten the smut to death enough. Because, like...
I mean, we will be able to come back to it.
Okay, fair.
This is not the only scene in the story.
This is not the only smut scene. We can beat more smut to death.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Alright. We're gonna move on and we're gonna talk about some more of a plot motion that went on here. So, after they fuck... we've currently got... They have the physical intimacy, and we're kind of using it to distract from any semblance of emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
However, they've also developed kind of a bit of mutual skill respect, and also, my favorite part of the Sokoku dynamic, their banter.
Yes.
The banter is back, the banter has been remarked upon by Chuya. Is this something that is kind of different for these two characters? Dazai, we see, he doesn't like Mori's lover advisor.
Right.
He has a lot of subordinates, not a lot of people who are going to banter with him. Chuya also just didn't seem to be in a position where he was going to have anyone who was really able to have that sort of casualness around him, in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, because the thing is, at the end of the day, these are both Yakuza members. And, you know, it's a pretty serious business. It's not all, like, lighthearted. We're going to joke around. They have very rigid power structures in place. So, even though Chia and Koyo get along well, he can't be informal with her anywhere where anyone else can see. And even when they are in private, she's still his boss. And then you have Luisa, who's just a nervous wreck, so she's not good at banter. So this is pretty new for them, this sort of ability to just go back and forth with someone without it being something that's going to get you in trouble.
So it's almost like not only are the two of them freshly married, the two of them are also learning how to have friends.
They are.
Neither of these people has ever had a friend before, but it's not shocking.
I would say Chuya actually has had friends. He's fairly well-liked. He was fairly well-liked in the Nakahara Kai. As we get more into his backstory, when he was pulled from the succession, that did impact the number of friends he had.
Which kind of makes sense. That's another thing that I'm very interested to learn more about. I have a lot of faith in your story to present itself to me in due time, so I'm not going to hurry that one along. So currently we're finding the two of them at a lot of frustration. We've got, so basically Chuyu's kind of caught up both with his own analysis and now that Dase's giving him info analyzed by the Port Mafia. I am struggling today.
The Mitsushimas?
Yes! I'm really going through it today, y'all. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we've got the Mizushima intel analysis, but we're not making headway. So, in the interest of helping our dudes out here a little bit from beyond the fourth wall, I'd like to do a little bit of analysis right here, right now.
Okay, go for it.
Alright, so I've got a couple of suspects here. My first one is Ongo. My list of reasons being, you literally keep making allusions to accountants. You like your allusions. You don't like Ongo.
That's true.
You have certain opinions about Ongo and his status as always a traitor.
Yeah.
And there are implications in here, not really implications, kind of actually flat out statements that the Mizushima clan has contacts within the government. So my number one, and these are not ranked by priority.
Okay.
So my number one guess here is Ongo. And second suspect here, Mori.
Okay.
It's Mori, every time Mori pops up in this story, he's doing something suspicious. And every time Mori pops up in the story, Dazai very clearly doesn't trust him.
Yeah.
Dazai, I mean, that's kind of an understandable thing in general. Basically, every Bungo Stray Dogs fic that has both Mori and Dazai usually does not have them in a very seeing eye-to-eye relationship. But there's something about the way that Dazai is leaning so hard on Chuya for his skills. And even though he says he doesn't trust him, it seems like there's this understanding between the two of them that neither of them are the weak. And it seems like Dazai is going out of his way to hide things from his boss. So that to me is saying that there's some suspicion on Mori. I might be completely far off with the Mori suspicion, but he's on there. My last one being Mori's other advisor. Oka, I think.
Yeah.
Oka. And, he's just suspicious. This is also a little bit of a me kind of knowing you thing, but generally with named OCs, you just keep circling back to him. And something about him just is not sitting right, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so that one is almost like there's very little rational backup to that. I just have a feeling. So let's see. Okay, so we get in a little bit of the ability dynamics here.
Yes.
We've had a little bit of show, Chuyu's ability, but obviously we have very little intel on Dazai's from the perspective of the Nakahara Kai.
Yeah.
This would make sense given that we, the audience, know that Dazai's ability is the same as in canon, and he requires a partner to have use of it. So I'm interested to see how that dynamic is going to work. We've established the lack of trust.
Yeah.
But we've also established that they're basically the only people that the two of them can rely on currently. Is there going to be a reflection of that in terms of how their abilities play with each other?
I mean, I'm writing a Sokaku story.
Yeah.
I feel like you can't write a Sokaku story without their ability and those dynamics coming into play. It is something that you will see probably sooner than you were expecting to see it. I know it was sooner than most of the audience was expecting to see it.
Okay.
So, yeah, that'll come up.
Fantastic. So there seems to be a little bit of confusion and or disagreement within the Mizushima ranking members about how Dazai is handling Chuya.
Yeah.
There's a lot of perceptions of Dazai's reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Him being cold, him being calculating, him being very heartless. And we can see that a little bit of that is coming into play in surprising the Mizushima brass on how involved he's allowing Chuya to be.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about why Chuya is making the decisions that he is to allow access to Chuya to some of these people?
Why Dazai's making that decision? From which people? We're talking about, like, the grunts? Are we talking about the subordinates? Are we talking about...
More, the people kind of on Dazai's level. Like, obviously, with this meeting specifically, Mori requested him, but with the strategy meeting before, he was the one who chose to pull Chuya in. And so he hasn't gone out of his way to hide the fact that he's having Chuya investigate. Was a calculated decision.
Well, there was something that got discussed on their way up to the meeting in terms of Dazai having spies on his tail. And because, and I believe Dazai's answer was, like, there were enough spies. Like, he didn't give an actual number.
Enough to make a difference.
Yes. And so, really, that's where it comes in, is Dazai's just aware that he's being watched. And that if he were to try and hide Chuya's involvement in what's going on, that would look just eons worse than being upfront and honest about it. And he is really in a good position to be able to do that because Chuya's just been, like, so completely cut off from his clan. He can go, like, you know what, I can control, in air quotes, I can control all of his incoming and outgoing communication, which obviously we saw that he cannot.
Yeah.
But he could still project that perception, regardless of how much everyone else buys into it. And so at the end of the day, there's just a lot of things that Dazai... that's kind of decided for Dazai by virtue of his position in the clan, by virtue of his relationship with the people on the top, because when it comes to people on his level, the only person who's at the same level as him is the senior advisor, Zoka. No one else is at Dazai's level, and then they both answer to Mori. And so it's a very, very small circle up there.
That would make sense. So I'm kind of guessing that it's more need to know on the basis of subordinates and grunts.
Yeah, so there's definitely subordinates that have seen Chuya in meetings. There's the people that are following him around, and at the end of the day, Chuya is technically a Mitsushima member because he married into the clan. And, you know, the last thing you want to do is look Dazai in the eye and be like, I'm not working with your husband. That's a great way to get yourself killed.
That would make sense.
Yes.
That would absolutely make sense. All right. We're coming up towards the end of my little questioning phase here. And I think that for this one it's been a little bit interesting because I think there's almost been more for me to digest as a reader than for me to really ask, because this is very much like I'm letting the story unfold. I'm letting it take me places.
Yeah, there definitely is with these chapters, specifically with chapter 7. I feel like there's just this air of, like, things are happening, but the ball hasn't completely started rolling yet. So it's very much kind of a, like, we're at some sort of precipice and we don't know where the drop is.
That's exactly what I'm feeling, and I think that's what's tripping me up on some questions, too, because there's so many ways that this could go, and I almost don't want to, like, presuppose it. Like,
okay.
Like, I just want to see where it's taking me. It's just so interesting to me.
Yeah, I will say, in preparation for this podcast, I did kind of go through the story to see where the next couple of chapters are going, and specifically, our next podcast, the next chapter is really going to give you some meat, and then the chapter after that is really, really going to give you some meat.
We're getting real meaty here.
Yes, we are.
Well, in regards to meat, I've got a little bit of meat here to discuss.
Okay.
So, there's a little passage in which Mori threatens someone non-specific, referring to them as a charity case of Dazai's. This is audio only, so y'all can't see the face I'm making, but I am in fact making a face that's basically saying, what the fuck? Who does Dazai care about? I know that, like, first instinct here is to say, okay, it's probably Otasaku and his orphans, but also this is an AU story.
Right.
This is you. And all of the characters are not always going to be playing the same roles that they played in canon.
Right.
So, did we get a little hint?
No.
No, I didn't think so. I feel like I ask this every podcast and every episode. You're like, no, I'm not giving you anything.
Sometimes I'll give you hints, but this is a reveal that I'm very pleased with how it plays out, so I'm not giving you anything.
Well, I'm really, really interested to see the reveal. I'm gonna have to stick Oda as a prediction for it, and also just for absolute shits and giggles, Kisaku Imino. So yeah, that is like very, very clearly a loose thread that I look forward to tying up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make note of it. I figure most people listening to this have read the fic and are probably more informed than I am here, but...
And even though I'm not going to talk about what the charity case is, the reason in particular that I put this in this chapter is because, as you were mentioning, it does seem like Dazai trusts his understanding of Chia better than Mori, and this is a reason why. There's clearly something going on in the background that influences how Dazai can act around Mori.
And it adds another layer to all of those Mori observations of the fact that he's not inspiring loyalty in the way that Koyo is through affection and reputation. He is inspiring it through fear and through control, and there's no intimacy to that loyalty.
Right.
And I've noticed that that's kind of a running theme in this story is what drives loyalty.
Yeah.
And what drives connection. And it's just a very interesting, pervasive theme to follow because it's very coupled with a lot of just very clandestine twists.
And that's something I really enjoy doing in my chapter fics. It's been a new thing for me since I joined BSD that all of my chapter fics are very, very much, they have this overarching theme. So my first story, it was lying and what is truth and what is the value of truth compared to a lie. And then my second story is really about like how far can you push your demons, like how much of yourself can you give up to a cause, really is and the fic is called Don't You Ever Tame Your Demons. And this one, it's in the title. It's in the title for all of them. But I really do like exploring like these overarching themes as we go through a story.
And the way that they're explored, it's with small reveals. It's with everything not being on the table. And so every small reveal kind of shakes the worldview a little bit. Sometimes it'll confirm things, like with that Mori reveal. It's very much confirming what I'm already very much believing about Mori's relationship. But there have also been things like Dazai's reaction to that threat. His reaction being a very visceral, emotional one that are surprising.
Yeah. And while something that I feel like doesn't really get talked too much ever is how young Dazai and Chuya are. They're younger than us. And I still think I'm pretty damn young. I'm like, if I was like, someone's like, hey, you're in charge of a Yakuza clan right now, I'd be like, no, thank you. I actually might take that if it meant that I can just delegate and get paid.
Yeah,
but I'd still be concerned.
It would absolutely depend on how much delegation, but I would really, really question the logic of anyone who looked at me and went, you are a qualified adult, please leave this Yakuza clan.
But they were so young, and Mori is, we don't know exactly how old Mori is in canon, but he's like...
He's in his 40s.
Yes, he is old enough to be Dazai's father, which is a fan theory that's brought up a lot. I don't buy into that theory, but when you really look at that Dazai reaction, what I want to point out is it's not just that these two men are, you know, mafia members and they're so used to violence and they're very dangerous. They're also young. And it's something that gets hit on more and more as we go through the story. Is just like everyone else their age is like in college.
Yeah, they're 22.
Yeah, they're married in a political alliance. Like, this is a lot of weight to put on someone's shoulders at that age.
And that's an interesting thing for you to address, but I think a lot of fan fiction writers will do that. Especially in a lot of content where canon doesn't. You see it a lot in anime, but you see it in Western television too, of your protagonists will be so young and go through so many crazy things, but their youthfulness is never addressed. They're treated as if they're adults who are in, like, stable and good places to be able to handle these things. And it's something that I actually really enjoy in fan fiction, that a lot of the times when narratives will brush over things of how young characters are, how traumatized they are, that's where fan works fill in the gaps there. Can you talk a little bit about how, even with an AU story, that's sort of like a pervasive theme in fan content, and in yours as well, like I've noticed it in this story?
Well, I think the nice thing about fan fiction, and the reason so many people are drawn to it, is that it really does, in most cases, give you a larger, more well-rounded picture of the characters being discussed. And that's because when it comes to fan fiction, there's not, like, ratings that we have to keep up. There's not a plot that we have to keep driving. That's why slice of life is really popular. You can really see all sides of the character. And fan fiction, in my opinion, really does humanize the characters a lot more. And that's because when we're writing these stories, we, the author, really have to put our head in, like, okay, what is their head like? And what is their position? And most of us are, we started writing fan fiction in our teens, keep going through early 20s. People keep writing as they get older and older, and you get more experience. And the older you get, the more you can look at what the characters go through and really put in the time to think about how that impacts people. And because fan fiction is incredibly hard to monetize, it's a passion project. And so I think that's one big reason why you get more of the in-depth character analysis. You get to see more about how their age compares to things, how their trauma compares to things, because this is a labor of love. And when you love something, you don't just want to do it halfway. You want to put everything into it.
Which makes a lot of sense, and I think that's why so many people connect to fan fiction, especially people who feel like canon has kind of left off or dropped the ball on characterizations. Because, like, as you said, there is so much ground for fan creators to explore without having to worry about driving a plot, making sure that your ratings stay high and you get a next season.
Meeting a deadline.
Yeah, it's just creating for the sake of creating, and I think that there is just some very, very cool content that comes from it that I almost wish that we saw a little bit more of in the mainstream. Fan fiction authors connect to the stories of the people that they tell. That's why, like, when things are so shipping-centric, I think that a lot of people can connect to that, because it's, instead of it being such a plot-driven, we've only seen bits and pieces of this relationship. Fan fiction allows us to develop so much of that, and I think the connection's very cool.
And, like, in my experience, the reason I write a fanfic is because I like a character and I want to learn more about them. Because when I'm looking at a piece of media that I'm like, you know what, this is great, I don't need anything extra from this, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, the TV series. I would never write a fic for that because I'm like, it's good. It's like, I got all the exploration that I'm interested in. I don't really need to see anything else from these characters. Like, I enjoy where it's at. Or with Yuri on Ice, I really enjoy that story, but I haven't written much fic for it because I'm like, you know what? I'm content with how the story explored the characters.
It doesn't feel like there's unfinished business.
Yeah, and so I feel like a lot of people, when it's, like, at the end of the day, the reason you write a fanfic is because you want to write about the characters, not necessarily because you want to write about the story.
I agree with that. I think that, you want to explore the characters, you want to explore their reactions. Sometimes you want to fix what happened to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, just fanfiction as a medium, I've found is simultaneously underappreciated in mainstream culture, but very, very important to the people who consume it.
Yeah.
And I really do think that is something that deserves a lot of mention, because I think the reason why people connect to fanfic is because of the topics and the way that it explores them.
Yeah.
So, my last main point here is going to be about the woman who ran into Chuya at the end, who absolutely knew they were married, despite having no real reason to draw that conclusion. So, I have a little theory about who she is.
Okay.
This one is based purely on knowing you. Yosuno. She has not shown up in the story yet. You are a huge Yosuno stan.
I am.
There's no reason for Yosuno not to be in this story,
That's true.
considering everyone you've used. So, that's my prediction for who this mystery woman is. Obviously, you didn't give us any appearance details. You didn't give us anything to go on. I cannot imagine trying to wait for the cliffhanger of this, not knowing when it was going to be released, but...
Yeah, well, I mean, this isn't a cliffhanger that I answer in the next chapter either.
That's a little bit mean.
Yeah.
Well, that's one to keep in the back of my mind then.
And this is actually the reason I did this, and this is not something that I did a little bit in Illustrations of Flying where I brought up a character right before they became important, but it was the same chapter. But it's something that I got from being a big Harry Potter fan. We still judge Joanne in this house.
Always.
But something that really stuck out to me when we were waiting for the 7th book to come out, and there were all these what's going to happen in book 7, and I bought the Muggle Net version of that, and I was reading through it, and I still have it. And it's just the way they explain things is, the stories in Harry Potter were just so well crafted, and MuggleNet was able to make all these great and accurate predictions because they pointed out there is never an important character in the story that does not get mentioned previous to their appearance. And so that's something that I wanted to try with this. And there's a couple of different characters that are going to kind of pop in and out before they're important, and so this is one of them.
Okay. That's very interesting. I'm always fond of hearing what you've picked up from the Harry Potter series specifically. It's been an incredibly long time since I reread, but...
Yeah, me too. I haven't reread them in a while. But it really was a writing masterclass when it comes to these big, involved stories. I think it's one of the best series I can think of, and I have done so much reading. I read all the time, and I've read a lot of the very big, popular young adult stories. Yes, I have read the Percy Jackson series. I feel that needs to always be mentioned whenever someone says Harry Potter. But there's just so many lessons in terms of just the technique of writing from that series that is just... I'm glad I read them. I'm not glad that J.K. Rowling has a Twitter account. But I'm glad I read the books.
I think we really all would have preferred that J.K. Rowling stopped talking and didn't give us cause to
that would have been fantastic.
Oh gosh, because I was a huge Potterhead as a kid, and ever since Rowling has started opening her mouth, I'm I like Harry Potter, but...
Yeah, and that's, I think, for me, the reason I don't really have that issue is because I use the books kind of as a study guide. I'm what can I learn in terms of writing technique from the series? And I want to say really the only author that I've done more learning from in terms of writing technique outside of 2 fanfiction writers, one being Ashita and one being someone in the Frost Iron fandom whose name I cannot remember, but they're my icon. I'll have to figure out what fic that was. Is Tamara Pierce. So Tamara Pierce and J.K. Rowling are really where my writing lessons came from.
I feel that was probably about my foundation too. Because I have read pretty much just about everything that Tamara Pierce is about.
I love all the books. Literally the only thing I haven't read is the New Mirror series because it just came out.
Yeah, same.
And I'm I'm stuck in fanfiction right now. And I will actually also give a shout out to John Flanagan, who's an Australian writer, wrote this series called The Ranger's Apprentice, which is fantastic for fantasy stories. And Stuart Hill, who wrote the Icemark Chronicles, which is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. The 3rd book broke my heart. I will never open it again, but it was very good. But I was sobbing.
That's a wonderful endorsement. I can't wait to have feelings. Hopefully,
if you've read Equivalent Exchange, you will definitely see Tamara Pierce, John Flanagan, and Stuart Hill influences in that.
And all I can think of is that Tamara Pierce wrote some of the best fantasy battle scenes. That makes me want to read that book because her battle scenes were
they're fantastic. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what I got this chapter. Sorry for being the most scattered thing known to mankind this episode.
Oh, you're totally fine. That's going to be me if we do get to record next week. Next week, just, I'm going to say it right now, is tentative because I will be in workshops next week, so we'll see if I'm alive by the time Wednesday rolls around. I'll be in workshops and interviews next week.
This podcast is really dependent on both Dessa and I surviving a week.
Yeah, well, surviving halfway through the week. But with all of your questions done, it's time for the Rika Watch.
Okay, Rika Watch. Fantastic. All right. Rika Watch 1. Who is the traitor?
Okay.
We have my predictions in. I'm sure his predictions will grow as we meet more characters.
Yeah.
If Ongo gets introduced, I'll do a little happy dance just for calling his existence in this fic. Okay, Rika Watch number 2. I'm really interested to see what else Tachihara does. I don't know why. I mean, I kind of know why, but you wrote this before that canon reveal, and also you don't pay attention to Bungo canon. So, it would be a very funny coincidence to me if Tachihara wound up having a similar role in this story.
Yeah, that would be amusing.
That would really crack me up. Clearly, Dazai's charity case is on the Rika Watch.
Right.
That was thrown in. That was mean. That was mean.
There will be more of those. I like throwaway line cliffhangers.
And I'll get real distressed about them. They'll all be mean. Let's see.
If you hear that, like, weird rumbling noise, the dog is right next to us, and she's wearing a cone of shame, and she's not happy about it.
She's incredibly distressed. She's been groaning all day. If you can't hear this groaning German Shepherd, I hope that we at least get some videos of it on the internet, because it's cute. Let's see. Rika Watch number 4. 4, yeah. I can count. Is our mystery woman Yosono? I know it's not getting answered in the next chapter now, but I'm still on a Rika Watch. Because it's still an unanswered question. I'm interested in answers.
Okay.
So, number 5. Number 5 is alive. Oh, boy. I'm still really interested to see who's headed up. You know, no, I'm changing this one. No, fuck it. How long will Chuya last before he develops feelings for Dazai? Slash... I mean, I was gonna say who's gonna develop feelings first, but I really don't think it's gonna be Dazai. That dude's really emotionally constipated. I'm not adding that one, but the first part of that, absolutely valid.
All right. So there's the Rika Watch. And then I guess my only other question is, how'd you feel about Elisa's appearance in this story? She's already been in the story once, but when I went to write her into this chapter, I was like, I don't remember what Elisa's like. Is she a child? Okay.
So, here's the thing about me. Elise creeps me out more than almost any other character in Bungo. You actually know who creeps me out more than Elise, and it's a shock to most people. But I thought you did fantastic because I was very unsettled every time she was on screen.
Yeah.
I feel like the way to write Elise is to just take every caricature of, like, a small girl that you can think of, especially the ones that you can apply to, like, horror movie Demon Child.
I would counter that with saying the way I wrote Elise was I used to do a lot of babysitting when I was young, and if you've never seen a picture of me, I'm black, and I was babysitting a lot of white kids, and white kids and black kids are raised very differently, whereas white kids will just, like, throw a fucking temper tantrum just, like, at the drop of a hat. You don't do that in a black family. It says, like, what are white children like?
I mean, Elise literally does kind of act like a white child. Elise does not act like an Asian child.
She does not. It's like, this is a white girl.
So, for people who have not seen a picture or heard me talk about, I'm mixed Asian. Asian kids don't act like that either. So I think you're dead on in modeling her after white kids.
They just start screaming, and I'm like, stop.
Yeah. I mean, hey, children in horror movies are basically just children in general, so...
I don't watch horror movies, so I can't say.
Valid. But yeah, I actually think that you did great on Elise because she was like nails on a chalkboard, which is just kind of how Elise is.
Yeah, poor Chia.
Poor Chia.
Like, it was good of Dazai to get him out of that meeting, but it was not good of Dazai to sacrifice him to Elise.
It really was not a nice thing. I mean, sending him away, yay. Sending him away to hang out with the demon child who may or may not be his boss's ability, nay.
Yeah, Chia has no idea what Elise is.
Yep. Oh, that's creepy as all hell. That's real creepy.
Yeah, that's why Chia was like, because like the common lie that people use is like, oh, Elise is Mori's daughter. And Chia was like, Mori's whatever the hell she is.
Oh yeah, Chia knows that's bullshit.
Yeah. Chia knows that Mori does not have a child. You know, the Nakarakai is good at intelligence gathering.
They sure are. They sure are.
But yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it up before my laptop dies. But if you got all the way through, thanks for listening. We will, in all likelihood, have a video for our next episode, but I'm not gonna promise that.
This was really cozy.
Yeah, this was really cozy. I do like having the video. Maybe we'll just like see how we're feeling, because when we do the video we have to like set up the entire set. Like, we gotta turn the lights on, we gotta get the DSLR out, we gotta put the set up, and this I just had to pull out the mic and press record.
We also have to put makeup and clothing on, and I don't know about you, but that's like the worst part for me.
I like wearing makeup.
I mean, I like wearing makeup, it just, the process of putting my face on, it's a lot. I'm just sitting here not being a person recording a podcast.
Okay. Well, with that said, thank you so much for listening all the way through. If you have questions about Chapter 8, that's what Rika will be reading next week, just Chapter 8. We won't be doing a doubleheader. But if you have those questions, feel free to drop those in the AO3 comments, YouTube comments, send them to my Curious Cat. Either of those options are good. We'd love to discuss some of those questions with you. But with that said, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you hopefully next week.
Fingers crossed. Thank you all for listening, and good night.
I don't know if this is... Okay. Bye.